The Christmas party was already in motion by the time we arrived. The kind that feels warm from the outside but tight once you step fully in. Soft music played from a speaker in the corner. Someone laughed too loudly near the kitchen. The house smelled like cinnamon, roast meat, and something sweet that had been baking for hours. Coats were piled on the spare bed. Glasses clinked. On the surface, everything looked right. My mom moved through the room like a practiced host. Smiling. Touching arms. Asking people if they'd eaten enough. She had on the same holiday sweater she wore every year, the one she said made her look festive but classy. People nodded at her like she was doing a great job holding everything together. My son stayed close to me at first, then drifted toward the couch where his cousins were playing a quiet game on a tablet. He was calm, polite, exactly how I'd taught him to be in other people's homes. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't grab. He just waited, watching, learning the rhythm of the room. That was when dessert came out. Plates appeared one by one, passed carefully from the kitchen to the dining table. A cake I recognized immediately. The one my mom always made. Chocolate layered, heavy, the kind people talked about weeks later. Someone joked that this was the real reason they came. My mom laughed and said, I know, like she'd personally done everyone a favor just by baking. Plates were handed around in a loose circle. A slice here. A slice there. People leaned forward, thanking her. Complimenting the frosting. Talking about how they were definitely breaking their diet tonight. My son noticed the plates. He sat up a little straighter. Not excited. Just attentive. He assumed, like any child would, that when something was passed to everyone, eventually it would reach him too. He didn't say a word. He didn't tug my sleeve. He just waited. The plates stopped moving. Someone glanced around. Confused. My mom looked down at the remaining cake, then up at my son, then back at the table. She tilted her head slightly, like she just remembered something small and inconvenient. Oh, she said lightly. I didn't save any for him. The room didn't react right away. There was a pause, the kind that's too short to call silence but too long to ignore. Then she added, still smiling, still casual, only family gets to eat dessert. The words landed softly. No yelling. No edge. Just placed there, neat and final. For a second, no one moved. I felt it before I fully understood it. A shift. Like the temperature dropped just enough to notice. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else suddenly found their phone very interesting. A few people looked straight at my son, then quickly away, like eye contact might make them responsible for what they just heard. My son looked at me. Not confused. Not crying. Just checking. Waiting for direction. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I kept my face calm. I didn't want to give her a reaction. Not yet. I watched the room instead. My aunt stared at her plate. My cousin took a bite he clearly didn't want. One person glanced at my mom, then at me, then pretended to adjust their chair. No one said anything. Not because they agreed. Because this wasn't new to them. This was just how things worked. My mom had already moved on. She was pouring herself coffee, talking about how rich the cake turned out this year. She didn't look at my son again. Not even to soften it. Not even to pretend. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't miscounted slices. She hadn't been overwhelmed. She had decided. Decided who counted. Decided who didn't. Decided she could say it out loud and the room would protect her by staying quiet. I reached for my son's hand under the table. He squeezed back once, small and steady, like he was telling me he was okay. That simple trust broke something open inside me. I smiled politely. I thanked someone for dinner. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't give her the scene she probably expected later. Because in that moment, watching my child sit there patiently while grown adults avoided his eyes, I understood something with complete clarity. This was never about dessert. And once I saw that, there was no unseeing it. On the drive home that night, my son fell asleep before we even reached the freeway. His head tipped gently against the car seat, mouth slightly open, the way it always did when he trusted the world enough to let go. I watched him in the rearview mirror at red lights, replaying the moment over and over in my head. Not the sentence itself. The ease with which it was said. That was the part that stayed with me. My mom had always been good with words. Not loud words. Not angry ones. The careful kind. The kind that sounded reasonable if you didn't slow down and really listen. Growing up, she never said no directly. She said things like, "That's not really appropriate," or "Let's be realistic," or "You'll understand when you're older." Family, to her, worked the same way. It was a word she used often, but never clearly. It stretched and shrank depending on what she needed in the moment. When I was a kid, family meant loyalty. Obedience. Not questioning decisions made for your own good. If something felt unfair, the answer was always the same. That's just how family is. End of discussion. Later, when I became an adult and stopped needing her approval to survive, the definition shifted. Family became a title you had to earn. By showing up. By agreeing. By not making things uncomfortable. And once I had my son, I realized something quietly unsettling. Family in her world was no longer permanent. It was conditional. At first, the exclusions were small. Easy to explain away. A birthday invite that slipped her mind. A group photo where my son somehow always ended up just outside the frame. A holiday plan that changed last minute, leaving us adjusting while everyone else already had a seat. I told myself I was overthinking it. That she didn't mean anything by it. That I was projecting old feelings onto new situations. That's what people like her count on. My son never complained. He adapted in the way children do when they sense the rules but aren't told them out loud. He stayed polite. He waited to be offered things instead of asking. He watched how others behaved and followed their lead. It broke my heart in ways I didn't fully admit yet. Looking back, the dessert moment wasn't the first time my mom drew that invisible line. It was just the first time she did it so clearly, in front of everyone, without even pretending otherwise. Only family gets to eat. She didn't say it with anger. She said it like a policy. Like a rule that had always existed and I was strange for not knowing it. And the room backed her up by doing nothing. That's when I understood how long this had been rehearsed. Not the sentence. The silence around it. Everyone there had learned the same lesson at some point. Don't challenge her. Don't call it out. It's easier to stay comfortable than to be right. I realized then that if I stayed quiet too, my son would learn that lesson next. Not through words. Through patterns. He would learn that inclusion is fragile. That kindness can be taken back without warning. That standing quietly and behaving perfectly still might not be enough to earn a place at the table. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep and calm in my chest, that I couldn't let that be the lesson he carried forward. Family shouldn't feel like a test you can fail without being told the rules. That night, as I carried him inside and tucked him into bed, I made a decision I hadn't planned on making when the day started. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to confront her in public. And I wasn't going to demand an apology she didn't understand how to give. But I was done pretending that family meant whatever she decided it meant that day. And the next time we spoke, I wasn't going to play along. The next morning felt strangely normal. Sunlight came through the kitchen window. The coffee maker hummed like it always did. My son patted in wearing mismatched socks and asked if he could have cereal or toast. Life didn't look any different, and that almost made the night before feel unreal. Almost. While he ate, he told me about a dream he'd had. Something about a snowman and a dog. He laughed at his own story, milk dripping down his chin. I laughed too, but part of me was listening for something else. A question. A complaint. Any sign that the words from the night before had landed heavier than I thought. They hadn't. Not yet. And that was what scared me. Children don't always react in the moment. They store things. They wait. They decide later what a moment meant. I drove him to school like I always did. We talked about spelling tests and who he sat next to in class. When I parked, he paused with his hand on the door handle. "Mom," he said. "Yes." He hesitated, then asked, "Did I do something wrong last night?" The question was simple. Quiet. Almost casual. But it hit me harder than anything my mother had said. "No," I said immediately, turning fully toward him. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not even a little." He studied my face the way kids do when they're checking if you mean it. Then he nodded, satisfied, and hopped out of the car. I watched him walk through the gate before I drove away. That was when the silence really started. My mom didn't call. She didn't text. No follow-up message about dessert. No joke to smooth things over. No explanation. She was waiting. Waiting for me to break first. To bring it up. To make it awkward so she could dismiss it as me being dramatic. That had always been the pattern. When something hurt, she went quiet. Let time pass. Let discomfort do the work for her. Eventually, people either forgot or decided it wasn't worth the effort. I had played that game before. Many times. This time, I didn't reach out. Days passed. Then a week. We were supposed to see her again for a smaller get-together. Just coffee. Casual. I declined politely. Said we were busy. Which was true, but not the whole truth. The truth was I was watching. Watching how my son acted now. Watching myself. He was lighter at home. Less careful. He asked for snacks without checking my face first. He talked more. Laughed more. It was subtle, but it was there. The absence of tension did something I hadn't expected. It made the contrast impossible to ignore. I realized how much energy I'd been spending managing situations around my mom. Anticipating moods. Softening words. Teaching my child to stay small enough to fit wherever she allowed him. And for what? So holidays could look good from the outside. One evening, while folding laundry, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, a text followed. I don't know why you're acting this way, but we need to talk. No mention of what happened. No curiosity about how we were. Just the expectation that I would explain myself. I read it once. Then again. Then I put the phone down and finished folding socks. Because something had shifted. The silence she used to control the situation no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful. And I knew that when we did talk, it couldn't be casual anymore. It had to be clear. And once it was said out loud, there would be no pretending it never happened. I didn't call her back right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I did. And I needed to say it without anger, without rushing, without letting the conversation turn into something she could twist later. A few days after her message, I replied. We can talk. Just us. No group plans. She responded almost immediately. Of course. I don't know why this has become such a big thing. There it was. The setup. The problem already minimized before it was even discussed. We met for coffee at a quiet place halfway between our houses. Neutral ground. No holidays. No audience. Just a small table, 2 chairs, and a line of people behind the counter who didn't know our history. She arrived first. Perfect hair. Neutral smile. The kind she wore when she wanted to appear reasonable. How are you? She asked as if nothing had happened. I'm fine, I said. Which was true. We ordered. Sat down. She stirred her drink even after the sugar had dissolved, filling the space. So, she said lightly. What's going on? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't bring up old patterns or unresolved history. I stayed exactly where the issue lived. At Christmas, I said, you told my son that only family gets dessert. She sighed, leaning back slightly. Oh my God. That. Already framed as an overreaction. I didn't mean it the way you're taking it, she continued. You know how kids hear things. You're being way too sensitive about this. I nodded once. Not agreeing. Just acknowledging the words. I'm not talking about intention, I said. I'm talking about impact. She laughed softly, shaking her head. I cannot believe we're doing this. It was dessert. 1 slice of cake. And now you're acting like I traumatized him. I looked at her carefully. He asked me the next morning if he'd done something wrong. Her smile faltered. Just for a second. Well, she said quickly, kids ask things. That doesn't mean. It means he thought he didn't belong, I said calmly. There it was. The sentence I'd practiced saying without heat. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger. In calculation. I never said he doesn't belong, she replied. But family traditions matter. And sometimes children need to understand boundaries. Boundaries, I repeated. Yes, she said, relieved. Exactly.
That's all this is.
I set my cup down.
Then here's mine.
She blinked.
What?
My child doesn't spend time in spaces where his place is conditional. Her posture stiffened. You're twisting this, she said.
You're making me the villain over nothing.
I'm not, I said.
I'm being clear.
She crossed her arms.
So what, you're punishing me now?
Keeping him away because I made a comment you didn't like. I held her gaze.
I'm protecting him, I said.
The words landed heavier than anything else I'd said so far. Her voice sharpened. You're overreacting. He's a child.
He'll forget.
I won't, I replied. Silence stretched between us. The kind that waits to see who flinches first. Then she said it. Well, if you're going to be like this, she said coolly, don't expect me to tiptoe around your feelings every time we're together.
That was it.
Not an apology. Not confusion. Not regret. A warning. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. She hadn't expected resistance. She'd expected control. And now that she didn't have it, she was showing me exactly who she planned to be instead. I didn't argue with her after that. I didn't defend myself. I didn't list examples. I didn't bring up every moment I'd swallowed over the years. I had learned, slowly and painfully, that explaining yourself to someone who benefits from misunderstanding you is a losing game. I took a breath and spoke carefully. This isn't about tiptoeing, I said.
It's about respect.
She scoffed.
Respect goes both ways.
I agree, I said. That's why I'm being honest instead of pretending nothing happened. Her jaw tightened. She leaned forward, lowering her voice like we were sharing something confidential instead of sitting in a public cafe. So what exactly are you saying? She asked.
That I'm not allowed to say anything in my own house?
I met her eyes. I'm saying my son won't be put in a position where he's singled out or excluded, I said. Not at your house.
Not anywhere.
She stared at me for a long second, then smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. You're really doing this, she said.
Over cake.
I didn't correct her. Because she already knew it wasn't about cake. Reducing it to that was the last defense she had left. I'm not asking you to change who you are, I said.
I'm telling you what I will and won't allow around my child.
Her smile disappeared. And if I don't agree? She asked.
Then we'll spend less time together, I said simply.
No threat. No drama. Just a statement of fact. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed tightly now. The conversation had shifted out of her control, and she didn't like it. So you're cutting me off, she said.
That's what this is.
No, I said. I'm setting a boundary. She laughed again, but this time there was an edge to it. People like you always hide behind that word. People like me? I asked calmly.
You act like you're so reasonable, she said.
But really, you're just punishing people when they don't do what you want. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Clarity. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm choosing what my son learns is normal. That's when she went quiet. Not the waiting silence from before. Not the kind meant to make me uncomfortable. This was different. She was recalculating.
Finally, she said, You're being very dramatic.
I nodded once.
You're allowed to think that.
Her eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me. She picked up her purse and stood.
Well, she said coolly, don't expect me to chase you.
I'm not, I replied. That surprised her. She paused, clearly waiting for me to soften. To say something like I hope you understand or I don't want this to come between us. I didn't. Because for the first time I understood something important. Boundaries don't need agreement to work. She left without hugging me. Without another word. And as I sat there alone with my untouched coffee, I realized something else too. For the first time, I hadn't explained myself to earn permission. I had stated my terms. And whatever happened next would be her response to them. Not my responsibility to manage. The change didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic fallout. No angry phone calls in the middle of the night. No family group chat exploding with opinions. What happened instead was quieter. And more telling. Invitations slowed down. At first, they came with softer language. We're just doing something small. It might be boring for kids. We'll catch up another time. I declined politely. Every time. Then the invite stopped altogether. I heard about things secondhand. A birthday dinner I hadn't been told about. A weekend gathering I saw in photos after the fact. My name wasn't mentioned. Neither was my son's. And strangely that hurt less than I expected. What surprised me more was what happened at home. Without the constant preparation, without the mental checklist of be careful, don't upset her, make sure he behaves perfectly, our lives got easier. Calmer. Lighter. My son stopped asking if he was allowed to take things. He didn't wait for approval before laughing or talking. He didn't scan faces for signals anymore. He just existed. One night, while we were baking cookies together, he asked if he could lick the spoon. Of course, I said. He smiled, simple and unguarded, and I felt a quiet ache in my chest. Not sadness. Relief. Relief that he was learning this version of normal instead. Meanwhile, the messages began to reach me through other people. She feels like you're pulling away. She doesn't understand why you're being so cold. She's really hurt, you know. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't correct the narrative. Because I noticed something important. No one said, she feels bad about what she said. No one said, she regrets hurting him. No one said, she wants to make it right. They only talked about how she felt now. That told me everything. A few weeks later, my mom posted photos from another gathering. Smiling faces. Full plates. A dessert table overflowing with options. The caption read something about family traditions and togetherness. I looked at the photos once. Then I closed the app. Not out of anger. Out of understanding. She hadn't changed. She just adjusted her audience. And without us there, she didn't have to explain herself anymore. That was the real consequence. Not losing us, but losing the version of herself that looked generous by comparison. One afternoon, my son asked why we didn't go to Grandma's house much anymore. I thought carefully before answering. Sometimes, I said, people don't know how to treat others kindly all the time. And when that happens, we take a little space. He nodded. Accepted it. Then asked what was for dinner. That was it. No confusion. No sadness. No sense of loss. Because children don't miss places where they felt small. And that's when I knew I had made the right choice. Even if it meant being quietly erased from someone else's version of family. A few months later, it was just the two of us on Christmas Eve. No big house. No crowded table. No performance. We ordered takeout, spread wrapping paper across the living room floor, and let the tree light stay on long after bedtime. Dessert came last, like it always does. Cookies from the bakery down the street. 2 plates. No rules. No waiting. My son didn't rush. He didn't ask if it was okay. He didn't look at me for permission. He just ate. And that's when it hit me. He never mentioned the cake from my mom's house again. Not once. No questions. No resentment. No confusion. What stayed with him wasn't the dessert he didn't get. It was what happened after. He learned that when something feels wrong, we don't pretend it's fine to keep the peace. He learned that kindness doesn't come with conditions. He learned that family isn't decided by who controls the table. He learned that his place in the world isn't something he has to earn by staying quiet. That mattered more than any apology my mother never gave. As for me, I stopped waiting for her to understand. I stopped hoping she'd reflect, regret, or reach out with something real. Because closure doesn't always come from the other person changing. Sometimes it comes from you deciding you're done asking. I used to think being a good daughter meant absorbing discomfort so others could stay comfortable. I thought keeping the family together meant smoothing over moments that cut too close. Now I know better. Being a good parent meant ending that pattern with me. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I didn't demand anything she couldn't give. I simply removed my child from a situation where love had rules. And in doing that, I taught him something quietly powerful. That he belongs wherever he is treated with care. That exclusion doesn't get a pass just because it comes wrapped in tradition. That sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. Just a clear step away. My mom forgot to save dessert for my son and said only family gets to eat. What she didn't realize was that in that moment, She taught me exactly what kind of family I was willing to build. One where my child never has to wonder if he deserves a seat at the table. And that lesson will last a lot longer than any slice of cake ever could.